We all remember the adrenaline, the thunder of explosions, the impossible stunts, the split-second escapes. Action films are built on chaos that looks dangerous, but isn't. Or so we tell ourselves. But what if some of the most unforgettable moments in action cinema weren't crafted over multiple takes, but captured in a single heartbeat because they had to be? What if there was no second chance? There are scenes that exist on screen not because they were perfectly planned, but because something went wrong and the footage was too powerful to ignore. A car plunging from a skyscraper with no room for error. An explosion so vast the crew held their breath. A fight performed once and never again because the actor refused. These aren't happy accidents. They're moments of tension so real, so irreversible, that they were filmed just once and locked forever into celluloid. Sometimes, the reason is budget. Other times, it's danger. But often, it's because reality refused to give the filmmakers a second take. And whether the audience realized it or not, what they saw was the only version that ever existed. This is not a celebration of recklessness. It's a chronicle of the razor's edge where cinema meets chance and the unrepeatable moments that pushed the boundaries of what films could show. Let's dive into 15 action films where the most iconic scenes happened once and only once. Factason. The Hunter. 1980. There's no rehearsal for dropping a car off a skyscraper. In The Hunter, Steve McQueen's final film before his death, the production crew had just one chance to pull off a stunt that would become its defining moment. The plan was simple in concept but brutal in execution. Launch a car out of a parking garage at the iconic Marina Towers in Chicago, sending it plummeting into the Chicago River below. The logistics were a nightmare. There were no visual effects to lean on, no green screen safety net. The crew constructed a special rig and reinforced the surrounding area to contain debris. The cost? Sky high. The margin for error? Non-existent. Once the car launched, there was no undoing it. The stunt was executed flawlessly. The car flew, twisted mid-air, and smashed into the water, all in a single breathtaking take. The footage was so raw, so violently beautiful, it didn't need a second try. And it couldn't have one. There was no backup car, no budget for a redo, and no safety guarantee if something had gone wrong. Steve McQueen, battling cancer at the time, reportedly insisted the scene remain untouched. It was, in many ways, the perfect metaphor for his career. Bold, defiant, final. Would modern studios even allow this stunt today, or would they bury it under CGI and edits? Fact are, Braddock. Missing in Action 3. It's D-Dop Bar. The explosion was real. Too real. When Chuck Norris returned for the third Missing in Action film, the production aimed to go out with a bang, literally. One sequence involved a massive explosion inside a prison camp set in the jungle. The special effects team had prepped carefully, calculating safe zones and blast radii. But something went wrong. As the detonation ignited, a fireball tore through the set faster than expected. One stunt performer, positioned closer than planned, was nearly incinerated. His escape was pure instinct rolling away from the blast just seconds before it engulfed the area. The moment was terrifying. But the camera? It caught everything. Instead of reshooting, the director made a chilling decision. Keep the take. Not out of laziness, but because there was no way to recreate the authenticity. The look of panic, the chaos, the rawness, it was unfiltered danger on film. And in the editing room, it became the centerpiece of the scene. The stuntman recovered. Barely. And the insurance paperwork nearly shut the production down. But what audiences saw was not a simulation. It was a brush with death. Would that footage have seen daylight if it happened today, or would it have been buried to avoid a lawsuit? Fact hash 3. The Exterminator. 1980. When the gun jammed, they kept rolling. The Exterminator wasn't known for subtlety. This grindhouse revenge film leaned into ultra-violence and guerrilla filmmaking. But during one pivotal execution scene, a practical prop misfire forced the crew into uncharted territory. The setup was a brutal gang execution using a real-looking machine gun prop rigged for blanks. It was supposed to simulate multiple bursts, but after the first shot, the mechanism jammed and the gun stopped firing. What happened next wasn't in the script. The actor playing the vigilante froze, then ad-libbed a chilling monologue. The victim, played by a terrified extra, reacted in real time, his fear unscripted. The director, sensing magic, let the camera run. No one yelled cut. The entire scene became a mix of real tension and on-the-fly performance. It was the closest the film ever came to genuine psychological dread. Later in post-production, the director decided not to reshoot or dub over the error. The broken prop had accidentally delivered the most believable scene in the film. Was it a mistake that became art, or just desperation captured on film? Fact: 4. Rolling Thunder. 1977. The murder scene was too raw to rehearse, and it showed. Rolling Thunder, a gritty revenge film with William Devane and Tommy Lee Jones, ends with a shocking shootout inside a bordello. The script called for Devane's character to execute his revenge with cold precision, but the final take, the one you see in the film, wasn't what was planned. During the shoot, director John Flynn decided to let the cameras roll without a full rehearsal. The idea was to catch something unpolished, and Devane, having immersed himself in the character's trauma, didn't just perform. He unleashed. He walked into the room, gun in hand, and delivered the scene in a cold, surgical fury, a look in his eyes that startled even the crew. When he pulled the trigger, there was no dramatic music, no stylized framing, just brutality. And then silence. Flynn immediately called it. That's the take. No second try. The power of the moment came from its messiness, the hesitation, the real emotional weight. The decision not to do another version wasn't about schedule or cost, it was about truth. The kind of truth you don't get twice. Critics later praised the climax for its authenticity, but few knew. It was all captured in a single, unrepeatable moment. Would a modern director trust his actor to go that deep without control? Fact #5. The Mechanic. 1972. They blew up the budget literally in one take. Michael Winner's The Mechanic, starring Charles Bronson, opens with an explosion. Not just any explosion, a precision demolition of a real building, designed to kick off the film with maximum realism. The building used wasn't a miniature. It was an actual structure scheduled for destruction. The production team arranged to film the real-life implosion as part of the scene. That meant exactly one shot, no resets, no missteps. The pressure was immense. Bronson's character plants explosives and walks away as the building crumbles behind him. In real time, the blast detonated on cue, the structure collapsed perfectly, and the scene locked into the camera with terrifying clarity. The cost of orchestrating that single take? Most of the day's budget. But the reward was cinematic gold. The building's fall wasn't just background, it was the movie's heartbeat. No CGI could have matched its weight. Winner later admitted they had no backup plan. If it failed, they would have rewritten the entire sequence. Would any studio today risk real infrastructure for one shot, or has digital made that kind of commitment extinct? Fact: Lilk. Runaway Train. Ijiobawu. No brakes, no backups, no chance to try again. Andrei Konchalovsky's Runaway Train lived up to its title in more ways than one. The film, about two escaped convicts trapped on a speeding train, was filmed in the dead of an Alaskan winter with real trains, on real tracks, moving at terrifying speeds. In one particularly tense sequence, the train barrels toward a bend while the camera captures an overhead tracking shot from a helicopter. But there was a problem. The weather was closing in, the train's brakes were unreliable, and the timing for the aerial shot had to be perfect. The crew had one chance. If they missed the angle or if the camera drifted off mark, they wouldn't get another pass. The helicopter's fuel window was narrow, the train couldn't reverse, and the sun was fading fast. Somehow, they nailed it. The helicopter swept over just as the train hit the curve, catching the metal beast slicing through the snow like a missile. The footage was so stark, so harrowing, that audiences later assumed it was a model. It wasn't. Konchalovsky refused to reshoot. Not out of vanity, but because the risk was too high. That scene was a dance between machines, nature, and chance. And it only happened once. Could a modern crew even get insurance for a shot like that? Fact: Su. Sorcerer. 1977. A bridge, a truck, and a storm no one could fake. William Friedkin's Sorcerer is infamous for its grueling production, but one sequence pushed everything to the brink. A truck carrying nitroglycerin must cross a rotting rope bridge in the middle of a monsoon. It's arguably one of the most nerve-wracking scenes ever put to film. But here's what most don't know. The storm wasn't fake, the mud wasn't staged, and the bridge? It almost collapsed. Friedkin insisted on practical realism. The crew built the bridge over a river in the Dominican Republic, waited for the rainy season, and used a full-sized truck for the stunt. On the day of filming, rain poured harder than expected. The river rose rapidly, and the bridge swayed like it would snap. Still, the cameras rolled. As the truck inched across, tires slipping and wood groaning, one of the support ropes snapped prematurely. The crew held their breath, but the vehicle lurched forward and made it to the other side. Barely. Friedkin knew. They wouldn't survive a second try. That was it. The footage is dizzying, damp, and terrifyingly real. No CGI storm, no model truck, just a single moment of engineering and madness colliding on screen. How many directors today would risk the entire shoot on a real storm and win? Fact. Ba. Death Wish San. Itu Bawu. The explosion that wasn't meant to be that big. By the time Death Wish 3 rolled around, the franchise had embraced over-the-top carnage. But one sequence, an apartment building rigged with explosives, went beyond planned chaos. The production team set up a controlled blast for a rooftop explosion. Pyrotechnics were calculated, actors cleared, and cameras positioned at safe distances. But due to a miscommunication with the effects team, the charge detonated with double the intended force. What happened next wasn't planned. Windows on surrounding buildings shattered. Car alarms wailed. The boom echoed through the city block. The shockwave knocked over an assistant camera operator. But in the middle of that mayhem, a perfect, unbroken wide shot of the building erupting into flame. Director Michael Winner reviewed the footage and made the call. Keep it! They wouldn't get that kind of visceral reaction again. And more importantly, no one was seriously hurt. Miraculously. The studio was furious about the insurance implications. But for the audience, that blast became one of the most talked-about moments in the film. Would any director today be allowed to use a take that accidentally broke safety protocol? Fact. Joe. First Blood Ijo Ba'ar. The cliff fall Stallone never wanted to repeat. In First Blood, John Rambo leaps off a cliff to escape a pursuing helicopter. What most fans don't realize is that what we see on screen is Stallone's actual fall captured once, for real, and kept out of necessity. Initially, a stuntman was set to perform the jump onto the tree below, but Stallone insisted on doing it himself, believing it would add realism. Harnessed by a cable, he leapt from the cliff and slammed into the tree harder than expected. The impact fractured his ribs. His groan on screen? Not acting. He was taken to a hospital shortly after, and the stunt was removed from the shooting schedule. There would be no second attempt. What remained was a moment of raw survival instinct, pain, and pure commitment to character. The shot made it into the final cut unfiltered, unpolished, unforgettable. Today, the stunt would be green-screened. But back then, it was just Stallone and gravity. Was it bravery or unnecessary risk for the sake of realism? Fact. Hasson 0. The Road Warrior. 1981. The stunt that nearly ended in death and stayed in the film. George Miller's The Road Warrior pushed stunt work to its brutal limits. In one unforgettable moment, a motorcycle henchman crashes into a car and flips violently through the air, his body spinning like a rag doll. That wasn't choreography. It was an accident. Stuntman Guy Norris miscalculated his trajectory. The crash sent him flying far beyond the safety margin. He landed awkwardly, his legs bending unnaturally, and the entire crew thought they had just witnessed a fatality. But Norris survived, barely, and asked to see the playback. The footage was horrifying but also hypnotic. The camera had captured the entire incident in a single, perfectly framed shot, raw and terrifying. Miller, shaken, consulted Norris. And with his blessing, the take was used. That one mistake became one of the most iconic moments in the Mad Max series, a crash that wasn't supposed to happen but couldn't be matched even if they tried. Would today's studios bury footage like this for safety reasons or embrace the mythos it creates? Fact. 11. Hard-boiled. 1992. A hospital, a hallway, and an unbroken ballet of violence. John Woo's Hard-Boiled is legendary for its operatic gunfights. But one scene rewrote the rules of action cinema. A 2.5-minute tracking shot inside a hospital as Chow Yun-fat and Tony Leung take down dozens of enemies without a single visible cut. It was shot in real time, and they only did it once. Why? Because resetting that hallway would have taken over half a day. The squibs, the shattered glass, the smoke, it was all practical. One mistake meant losing hours. During the take, everything hung on timing. Actors had to hit marks blind. Effects detonated in sequence, and cameramen weaved through chaos like dancers. There was no room for error. Miraculously, they pulled it off. Woo reviewed the footage and immediately locked it in. The take became legendary not just for its technical brilliance, but for the audacity to attempt it without a safety net. How often does action cinema still take risks like this where even the camera could fail? Fact. Shibi. Police story. 1985. Jackie Chan's most dangerous slide for real. Jackie Chan is no stranger to pain, but in Police Story, he flirted with death. The film's climax features a moment where Chan slides down a pole wrapped in lights inside a shopping mall. What audiences saw was thrilling. What they didn't know was how close it came to disaster. The pole was real. The lights were real and live, with electrical current flowing. As Chan slid down, he was burned by the lights. Shattered glass exploded around him, and he crashed through a kiosk at the bottom. It was done in one take. There was never a plan for a second. Chan suffered second-degree burns, a dislocated pelvis, and multiple lacerations. But the footage? It was electrifying, and it made the final cut. The studio wanted to cut the scene for safety concerns. Chan refused. It was, he said, the price of doing it real. Is authenticity worth that kind of sacrifice, or is that a myth we sell to justify the pain? Fact. Hasson 3, bullet in the head, 1990. The blood bag burst too early and changed the scene forever. John Woo's bullet in the head is often overshadowed by his more commercial hits, but it contains one of the most jarring death scenes in Hong Kong cinema. In a pivotal execution moment, a supporting character is shot in the head at point-blank range. The timing was everything. Gunfire, blood spray, collapse. Except the blood rig malfunctioned. The squib detonated half a second too early, exploding before the actor's head reacted. It looked wrong. But something about the sequence, the shock, the confusion, the delayed collapse felt more real than the planned choreography. Woo! Reviewing the footage, realized the imperfection mirrored the chaos of real violence. Rather than reshoot, he kept it. That half-second of error turned the scene into a brutal, unpredictable moment that left audiences stunned. Sometimes, what breaks the illusion is what makes it truthful. Would a Western studio have allowed a flawed take to define a film's emotional peak? Fact. Hasson 4. The Man Who Would Be King, 1975. A fall written by fate and captured in a single, terrifying take. In John Huston's The Man Who Would Be King, Sean Connery's character meets his end by falling off a rope bridge into a canyon. The scene called for a dummy to be dropped from the bridge, mimicking a real body plunging to its death. But the dummy caught on the bridge's edge and spun violently on its way down, limbs flailing in an uncannily human way. The camera kept rolling, and the final shot looked so disturbingly lifelike that many thought it was real. Huston was stunned. The unplanned motion gave the moment a grotesque realism. He never asked for a second take. That footage stayed. Not because it was perfect, but because it was eerie, accidental perfection. How often does a mistake give a film its most unforgettable image? Fact. 15. Terminator R. Judgment Day. 1992. The nitrogen truck crash was real and they only had one shot. The chase under the L.A. canals is one of the most iconic scenes in T2, but one part stood out. The liquid nitrogen truck slams into a corner, tipping and crashing spectacularly. What most don't know is that the entire crash was done in one take because they had no choice. The truck was custom-built and the explosion meticulously timed. Everything had to happen precisely. The crash, the liquid nitrogen release, the camera angles. The stunt team rehearsed for weeks. On shooting day, every crew member held their breath. The truck hit the mark, tipped violently, and burst in a plume of icy fog. No injuries, no second attempt. James Cameron locked the footage immediately. If anything had gone wrong, they would have needed weeks to rebuild the rig. Today, it would have been CGI. But in 1991, it was all or nothing. Did that risk buy realism, or was it just controlled chaos with a lucky ending? Bonus fact: Apocalypse Now, 1979. A real breakdown, a real blade, and a scene that was never meant to happen. The opening scene of Apocalypse Now is hypnotic. Martin Sheen, half naked, in a Saigon hotel room, spiraling into madness. He punches a mirror, smears his blood, and collapses in anguish. It's disturbing, raw, almost too real, because it was real. What many don't know is that Francis Ford Coppola didn't plan the moment. Sheen, battling alcoholism and depression during the chaotic shoot, was actually drunk during filming. Coppola turned the camera on and let him spiral. When Sheen punched the mirror, he sliced his hand open. Blood poured. Crew members moved to intervene, but Coppola waved them off. He whispered to the cameraman, "Keep rolling." Sheen fell into a rage, then into tears. The camera captured a genuine mental and physical breakdown. The actor later said he barely remembered it. The scene made it into the film with almost no edits. Years later, Coppola admitted it was one of the most ethically ambiguous choices of his career, but he defended it as a glimpse into the real madness behind the role. Would that scene even be legal today? Or would it be seen as exploitative, a line no director should cross? Some scenes demand a second take. These didn't allow one. Whether it was danger, chaos, or sheer unpredictability, each moment we explored was lightning in a bottle captured once and never again. No safety net, no reset button. But here's the question. Should these moments be celebrated or condemned? Did they elevate cinema with their raw authenticity? Or did they cross a line in the name of realism? Tell us, which of these one-take scenes haunted you the most, and should filmmakers ever risk this much for a single shot?